All right, Alejo, we finally got this going, man. What's going on, dude?
All good, man. All good. Just doing the
Yeah,
things, you know?
I hear you, dude. Like, I'm so glad. First, I got to meet you, and immediately I was sitting there going, like, I'm going to get this guy on the podcast because I just love what you do, and I'll let you tell the audience a little bit more about what you do. But I just love finding people that are doing something that I kind of aware of, but kind of go like, whoa, that's a whole other area. This note taking, this kind of sketch notes and things like that you do. So tell everybody a little bit about like you, what you do, and all that, because it's just so
Sure thing.
fantastic.
Sure thing. Well, thank you for having me in the podcast. I'm glad we were able to connect here because we couldn't talk during the conference. Like we didn't catch up there, but I'm glad we were
Yeah.
able to do it now. So yeah, I'm Alejo. I'm originally from Costa Rica, and what I do is called Sketchnotes. I like to say that I wanted to learn all the languages in the world because I've always been passionate about cultures and communication. And because of that, I learned to draw so that I could communicate with everybody. And then I pursue a career in graphic design and in illustration. And then through a rabbit hole on Instagram, I found out about this thing called Sketchnotes. And I was like, okay, so let me get this straight. People pay to get you to conferences and learn from big thought leaders while you draw and travel. Sign me in. I want that. So I wasn't even sure if I was able to pull it off because my illustration style used to be scratchboard. And I used to spend days or weeks in one illustration, like iterations, different thumbnails and composition and all that. And this is like, a 45-minute talk, and you draw it on the go. You make a lot of illustrations in that 45-minute frame, and in the hour that you spend there, it's done. So I was like, I don't know if I can pull that off. I feel like I could if I give it a try.
Yeah.
So I gave it a try, and the rest is history. I've been doing this since 2018, hundreds of events now, and like paid, and also just me geeking out on podcasts and
Yeah.
TED Talks and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
You
where
get
I'm
the
at.
best of both worlds there a little bit, right? But like to someone who's never heard of like the graphic note taking or the graphic recording, how would you define it?
Yeah, it's essentially taking notes with pictures.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's in a nutshell. I've always drawn, like just because I like to draw. And this kind of graphic recording sketch notes is more like tailored to corporate communication, right? Because the
Yeah.
purpose of that is to communicate, to distill the basic ideas or the most important ideas and communicate them in a clear and compelling way so that people can remember them.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do it to the level of polish that I do to, do it. I encourage everybody, even if you cannot draw, to at least doodle while you are taking notes, because it's scientifically proven that when you engage your senses, when you are writing with your hand, not typing,
Yeah.
you are reinforcing neural connections that helps you understand better. Now, if you do it professionally, that's another kind of skill. Like active listening is the best thing that you need to improve. Be able to distill what's important information, then synthesize it, and then adding to that, having good drawing skills just, of course, like makes people be like, whoa.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I was first introduced to it when I was at an agency and we were going to be moving to a new office complex. And with like 300 people, we did a roundtable kind of like event where everyone got to express what they wanted out of the new space. And we brought in this team that put in a huge wall, like sketch wall, right?
Yeah.
I know you've seen it and I know you've done it. And I was watching as we were going through the whole process of what do you want in a common space, in a meeting room, in whatever. And they were drawing and taking notes at the same time. And I'll never forget when it was days later and we had to come back to revisit that. And as the executive team kind of figure out what the priorities were, that was the most fascinating capture I've ever seen of a meeting. And it was so great to have because you get, like you said, like those images and the little drawings next to a big key phrase or something really drives it home, right? Like you said, the visual component has such a scientific kind of like improvement in the way you comprehend and remember.
Yeah, and it's it's how we are ingrained as a species. Like since the caveman, we drew in walls so that we could communicate things. But it's not only the communication side of like seeing a picture and understand that it means something, but it's also the interactive part of it. Like for speakers, it's like I'm saying this and I'm seeing it interpreted there. For people who are in the audience, it's like, okay, I'm understanding something, and then I'm adding another layer of meaning here that is reinforcing, like kind of super gluing what I'm learning through these visuals. And then for the kind of situation that you were in, that's even better, because it's like you are building something together and then you're essentially seeing your voice expressed. It's like somebody's getting me, he's understanding what I'm saying, and we're building this connectively. And essentially it's like everybody is literally on the same page, which is fantastic. We take for granted a lot. I feel like there's a comeback of that interactivity, and I think it stands out a lot, especially in America, because from the history of education in all senses, like from formal education for the kids all the way to higher education, there's been this emphasis of being just like a lecture based sort of thing. Like the speaker is the one who shares the knowledge, the other one just needs to listen to it, and that's it. And I am a firm believer that the best learning that happens is when people are engaged with the content, like battling, so to speak, or conversing with it. And one of those ways is just taking notes, or seeing somebody taking notes and like questioning them. I think there's so much richness in there, and that's why people value it so much. Like, of course, it brings value to the table.
That's so cool, and it doesn't hurt that you're an incredible illustrator and an amazing. Like your signature is so good, and we're gonna show some of that in a second. But how we both met was a few weeks ago. We were at Creative South out in Columbus, Georgia, and big shout out to Mike Jones, who puts that on every year. It was my first time going, and it was my first time speaking, so I was kind of in that zone of like a little nervous, but also so excited.
Yeah.
And everything was the energy was great and everything. And I'm done. And a few moments later, I see something tagged on like Instagram, and there's this drawing, and it's a quote from something I said. And I'm like, I have to find this person. And thank God you were wearing the beanie, because I was like, about an hour or two later, I think that's the only chance I got to see you. And I'm like, are you the guy that just drew that? And you're like, that's me.
Yeah. Yep.
I was so excited, dude. Like that's such a gift. I can only imagine people who have gotten your stuff and did not know it was maybe even happening. What kind of reactions do you get when you send some? I mean, and then like this is literally what Alejo did here, so you can see there. And he just sent this to me as well. He sent me a digital file. It's so awesome. What a great thing to share. That the momentum and the what this must do when you do this. It's you giving time and depositing what you hope is going to give you some return, right? But what have people's reactions been when they saw this?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because like, of course I do this professionally, but when I do it out of sheer will, I do it for two reasons. One of them is I'm a geek for improvement. So I'm always testing different ways to approach this, and I take this as practice and as challenges for myself. So for Creative South, 14 talks in 2 days. Let's do it. Let's see how it goes. I have never done so many. And then the other one is just I believe in generosity. That generosity is a habit that must be cultivated, that must be intentionally brought, intentionally applied. And generosity for me is just giving of what I know it's valuable, to help others, to either is like a smile, or somebody's like, oh, this is cool, like to make them feel good about themselves. But it's also to show appreciation with people who are already spending their time and wisdom with me. So I started doing that last year with like thought leaders that I follow for a while, and joining their webinars, joining or like doing the sketches of their podcast. And yeah, surely as a marketing strategy, it's like, yeah, they can reshare it if they like it, and that works out well. But I always approach to it as like, hey, you've given me so much, let me repay you in some way, because I charge thousands of dollars for this sort of thing. And I don't tell them that, they probably
Yeah.
already know because I'm working for corporations and stuff like that. But I don't do it as a kind of like, hey, you have to give me back. It's like, hey, this is yours, do with it whatever you want, just take it as a thank you, as because I appreciate what you do. And man, your first, like, the talk that you did, it was like the best way to get started, that because like it got people like already in the mode of like, okay, I'm paying attention. I'm gonna be talking here. There's gonna be some elephants in the room that are gonna be
Yeah.
addressed. And I love that boldness that you brought to the table and the perspective that you brought. So it got me pumped. Plus, you used some metaphors that was like low hanging fruit for me to just apply there. It's like you use the AI as a what's it called,
Co-pilot.
a co what's the term, like a
Sidekick.
sidekicks, yeah, sidekicks,
So
there you go.
there it is,
Yeah.
right there. You can see that's his little drawing.
Yeah. And I was like,
I
yep,
love that.
I thought immediately about that, and I was like, I have to draw this. So
And I think that's the one that I saw online or
Yeah.
somewhere on Instagram. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I have to find this person because like that
Yeah.
who first, just the neatest thing to see, and your positivity and everything about it, just so amazing to watch. And then I was like so excited that you'd be doing this for everybody else. And then I talked to a few of the other speakers, and as well, just so blown away. And what a nice little treat at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
also too, like, then knowing that if you were just a person that attended, and knowing that you shared these things, like this is like the people that take notes analog wise, like me. I can't do the
Yeah.
digital stuff as digital as I am, right? I love the analog version of this stuff. So I can only imagine people like loving this, like, hey, here's my takeaway from a conference that everyone, they're costly, there's travel.
Yeah.
You want a good takeaway. And I think that's the one thing I think you really bring in this way. What was the most challenging, maybe even in the beginning or whatever, conference or talk or thing that you had to like interpret? Do you remember? Has there been anything that was really challenging?
Yeah, I'm gonna punt that because I didn't answer your question of how the people react.
Oh, go ahead.
And I want to get to that. So, but
Go ahead.
that is short. People react as you react. Essentially, they're like, "Wow!"
Just like me.
Yeah, there's like three things that they say. There's like, "Wow, did you just do that?" That's the first one that they say. The second one is like, "I wish I could draw. I cannot draw a stick figure that's like, I could have it framed and say like, yeah, this, I'm gonna get this response at some point, or this answer at some point." And the other one is like, where can I get it? Like, are you gonna share it? Like, there's sort of things that people always ask. So yeah, for conference like this, I last year I did it. I went to Creative South and I did it actually in with markers on a sketchbook. I think I have it here.
So you were at that point, were you still only doing it marker wise?
Yeah. Oh, well, that day, wow. I like that time.
Dude.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. I think markers is less forgiving, right? Because like,
there's no undo.
There's no undo, and because of that, I mean, there are ways, but I usually don't. And because of that, I tend to be more effective in digital media. I can get more fancy, and I get super fancy with those ones, and that's probably why like I was kind of afraid of it. But it's worth it. I like it, and I like the challenge. So okay, so your question was the most challenging session that I've had. I mean, I've had different sessions that are challenging for different reasons, because I've been in rooms in which people are talking about all different kinds of topics. So from healthcare stuff to like safety and defense stuff to like mining, real estate, and all dense topics. And this works out for people who work with very dense and boring topics, because it actually makes people pay attention through all that jargon. And I think one of the sessions that I was probably, it was very hard for me, was a session that I had, I don't know how many years ago, and they were talking about something that had to do with specific materials for extraction of gas and mining situations. And they were just starting to talk about like names of materials that I didn't know, because usually if they're talking about a problem that is happening, I get the gist of the context and can interpret that context. But if we're talking about specific objects that I don't know, then I became frustrated because it's like, I don't know what I'm gonna draw here. So I like looking back and see if they have any slides or anything that I can grab there.
Insert image here later, right?
Exactly.
Like...
And I had other session that it was a demo. So it was essentially, this is how you create your own avatar. It was for like a teaching conference thing. And they were going like, so you go and click here and then you go click. So there's not like high level ideas. I'm just like waiting for them to say something along the lines of like, and this is important because, and that's what I capture. But when it's like step 1, step 2, step 3, it's like, okay, you don't really need me to draw step 1, step 2, step 3 because you're showing it. So that was challenging, but ended up going well. And then in Creative South, the second day was hard because there was a break that like there was some like overlapping of time.
Yes.
And because I didn't get a break, my brain was mushed.
Oh,
so
I can only imagine.
Actually, there was one talk that I like listened half of it, and that's the context that you see there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else she said afterwards, so I'm sorry but I still captured good stuff. And then the next one, unfortunately, my wife was there, so she heard the first part. When I came back, I listened to the second one, so I kind of cheat a little bit in the sense of like I had to kind of go back and didn't finish on those 2 days. Like I spent the weekend kind of bringing that back together. But my brain was mushed because of the lack of breaks.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most challenging thing because your attention is the thing that it's not my ability to draw. Like my hand never hurts.
It's the
it's
comprehension,
just my brain
right?
processing
and
information.
Too much information, and those cycles of like you get a nice break in between, you can catch up, and then the next one starts. But when that schedule probably is not in your favor, I can only imagine. Yeah, that's crazy, man. And in terms of tools and technology, right? Are you primarily now just iPad?
Ideally, yes. I do a lot of like virtual stuff. It's just better because I'm at home.
Sure.
I can do it at home. But actually, I have a gig next week that I'm going on site, but I'm going with my iPad and they have screens and all that. But if it's not that, then it's markers and it's like a big board, like 40 by 60 inches. And kind of like Ink Wars in Creative South, if you didn't go to Creative South, but horizontal, not vertical. And that's a lot of fun too. I do try to lean more towards digital because environmental reasons, foam core board is not recyclable and I haven't found a material that could be recyclable and good for all the logistics that it entails. And then it's just also like easier to carry. I just carry
You're like, and you got your like years worth of stuff in there. It's like the what you could store has just got to be amazing. That's great.
And if people have big screens, they can share it even bigger than I could with one board. So yeah, I haven't done like big walls like the one that you mentioned. Like I've seen them, I haven't done them because I usually like people hire me for a standard sort of thing. I haven't gotten super out of the box clients that are willing to experiment with that sort of thing. Maybe I'll get them at some point. That would be fun. But for now, digitally is like the go-to medium.
Yeah, it's just so exactly. I've found that has been my way of trying to, if I'm going to a conference or whatever, the iPad is the one way that I think I'm a little more capturing certain things, or even just writing notes. I think I'm like that. The people that come up to you all the time. I'm afraid to doodle because I think it looks so bad. But if it's just for you, and I'm not making a business out of this, I think there's a liberty and there's a freedom and there's probably more of an interpretation you get by putting in those little drawings next to your own little note taking, right?
Absolutely. My first sketchnotes before I knew about sketchnotes were just me drawing things around me. Like I was bored in class, like really bored, but I didn't want to, like just fall asleep or anything like that. And because I've always liked to draw, then I was just draw things about, around me. Like I will see my classmates, I try to draw my classmates, or I had an idea and I'm like trying to draw it, but I knew that the teachers were going to call me out. I knew they were going to see the guy who is like just doodling in class and they will say, hey, what was I saying? Whatever. So it made me pay more attention because I knew that was going to happen. So I was paying attention. And if I heard something interesting, I will just write the sentence or the word And when they asked me, I was like, actually, you were saying this, this, and this, and this. So they stopped
Good.
bothering me. But I realized then after, when I was, studying and all that, I saw the drawing, and even if the drawing had nothing to do with what the teacher was saying, it kind of like grounded me in time. Kind of like when you see a photo and you remember everything that was going around, the
Yeah.
smells, the sounds, and all that. It's like that kind of complete picture of what was going on around you, anchored in one image that was happening to me. So I was like, oh, I just keep doing it. And then, it was just kind of urban sketchings with notes. And then it transformed into, oh, that sounds funny. And I'll like draw that thing. And when I finally saw Sketchnote, I was like, oh, okay, there's a system for this. There's a ways to manage this that is more effective. And then I started
That's
geeking out on
great.
that.
I
So
love the way you said
yeah,
that. It's almost like if you have a photographic memory in some way, that photo, that image triggers every 360 sensory thing about that moment. And you're right.
yeah,
It's almost like what
yeah.
a great way to comprehend. And I've been noticing more and more, I think because of the journaling and some other, I can't remember what it's called, but there was another thing that was like a big trend that was journal note taking, that everyone had like it was almost like a combination of that and scrapbooking, where you had like a lot of little tape and things like that, like to use to underline
Oh yeah.
stuff and whatever. I think that's in the same genre. And I saw a lot of my
Mhm.
students doing that when they were taking notes or organizing a project and coming up brainstorming. I saw the difference in the students that were much more organized with their notes than the ones that were a little bit more like, oh yeah, I'll just come up with it in my mind. But like there is such a benefit to this like organization, you know?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It is. Everything. So I had a friend who it used to annoy me so much because we were part of a group and we were like organizers. We organized
Mm-hmm.
activities and stuff like that. And we'll go to meetings and we'll had agreements like, this is what you need to do for next time. This is blah blah blah. And he wouldn't take notes. And I'm like, hey dude, are you gonna remember? And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna remember. So, surely enough, he would not remember every single time. And I'm like, why don't you just like write it down? Like, because it doesn't matter. It's funny, but it doesn't matter if you even go back and read it. Just the fact of writing it against is reinforcing that idea in your mind. There's like, I have to find the scientific evidence of this because I'm sure there is, but it's just so weird that just the fact of doing something activates your memory so much effectively than just thinking about it. And I think it's partly because we have so many thoughts every day, like every minute. We can handle so much information that our brain cannot really access it so much. And I feel like when you put it somewhere, at least your brain is like a pensieve from Dumbledore, right? Like your ideas are somewhere stored, and your brain kind of like takes a break from that, and then has a place that is specific, that even if you don't go to that place, your brain can recall it was there, and then you can kind of try to remember it. But if it's just in a cloud of noisiness and buzz of different ideas, then it's very hard to pinpoint. We need that, as long as we are human creatures, like human
Yeah.
animals, like we need that physicality of things to make sense
Oh
of
yeah,
our world,
specifically
and
when
that's how our
digital
brain
has gotten
works.
so overpowering in our
Yeah,
everyday. I think those relying on the natural ways that we connect with things,
yeah,
you definitely are putting that, I think, in the forefront here. One of the things I was so excited about talking to you about was kind of like bringing to a person that is just our one of our, I'm sure our listeners go to these conferences. It might even just be a meeting at their work. It might even just be a classroom or a course they're taking. What are some of those basic
mhm.
elements that you have found in doing these visual notes that even a non-skilled artist can kind of learn from as they try to note take for those memorable things?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so that's a good question, and I want to make here the caveat that there are different mediums for different kind of situations. Like the kind of sketch notes that I take have a purpose, and if you go to like a lawyer's office or like dealing with something like that, you don't want to take sketch notes like that because you want to actually capture
Yeah.
minutia content. So it depends on the content that you're going to capture and the purpose of how you're going to use it, that the format might vary. If you're going to take notes like handwritten, then I mean, I will just advise anybody to just take handwritten notes all the time. Just even if they're just writing things, the best way to kind of get started that I've found, if you are very hesitant about the drawing part, is like making essentially you have your page and you make two columns and you essentially go bullet point on the left column. Let's see,
Yep.
mirroring. So left column is here, and then on the right column, if you think about something that could match that, let's say that the first column was like make groceries more accessible, and then you think, oh, maybe like a shopping cart, then you draw a shopping cart here, and you don't have to put drawings for everything, but it's just an easy way to kind of like think about an idea, drawing, an idea, drawing, an idea, drawing, an idea, drawing, and the format is so simple that it doesn't get easier than that, honestly. After that, if you want to continue to keep improving your abilities, I would suggest that you focus on active listening and active reading. Many people take this for granted, the active reading part, because we read so haphazardly, like we have so much information to go through. But I've actually realized that it's easier. It has been easier for me to learn how to distinguish the main ideas by learning how to read and distilling those things from books or from articles and stuff like that, and like taking the main ideas from there, because all the ideas are there. If you want to go a little bit more with steroids, I guess, you try to do that and then you put that to ChatGPT and say, what are the main ideas, and then you compare to make sure that you're learning that. So that's because that's the main skill of taking notes. Like, you want to be able to polish your active listening so that what you're capturing is the main ideas, not just fluff. And then after that, there's a lot of things that have to do with hierarchy and design and all that. But if you get to that level and you're like, hey, I want to keep improving this, I'm seeing the work of sketchnoters and I want to approach this in a different way, then there's a plethora of resources out there. I teach some courses. A lot of companies teach courses, so you can get lost a little bit on that. And if you have questions, for anybody who's listening to this or watching this, feel free to reach out on Instagram, and I can point you in the best direction based on your in your own level and your goals. But for people who are just starting, just take notes. Attach some simple drawings to notes. They don't have to be fancy. They don't have, like, I'm a professional illustrator, I do fancy because I like it and I can, but you don't have to.
It's just for you.
It works even if you, it's just for you. It's just for you. So just have fun with it, and then learn about reading, active reading, which is questioning what you read, and active listening, which is questioning what you're listening to. Ask, like, okay, what does this mean? How does this apply? All those things, having a conversation with the content that you're listening and reading, makes you a better active listening.
Is there a good tip in that? Because I can understand with active reading, because you're at your own pace and you can stop and pause. But in active listening, you can't control the person who's speaking. Is there a way to, like, as you're absorbing it and trying to be active with it, they're still talking. So what's the, like, is it just practice makes perfect with that, as far as go to more talks, go to more things where you have to listen?
That's true to an extent. I think we just have to recognize that we do that all the time. Like, we are interpreting or trying to interpret what people are saying all the time. And actually, one of the big barriers of active listening is that we are thinking about our comeback answer before we're listening to what the person has said, finished. So, like, is the main approach for this is just being curious and asking questions. So when I'm listening, what you're saying, what you're trying to ask, like, I'm asking myself, what is he trying to say? What is he getting at? What is the point that he wants me to make? And if I'm not sure, because I'm a conversation, I can ask you. And that will be a good practice if you're in conversations, to practice active listening, to ask, to make sure that you're understanding. In that way, you refine that process in your brain and realize, okay, I'm getting there. I'm finding the gist of understanding what people are meaning with the content they're sharing. Besides that, it's just essentially asking good questions. I'm asking questions all the time. And when I'm on a live, listen to a podcast or listening to a keynote speaker, I'm asking constantly, what is he or she trying to say? what does this mean? If they're telling a story, like, what is the point they're trying to make? When they say these are the three things, or certain like phrases that pinpoint they're going to say something important. If you only hear one thing from this talk, that's one of the things, like, okay,
Yeah.
they're going to say something important, right? The three things that I found that are helpful. Okay, there are three things. It's a list. It must be important. Something that I regret have said, or like, this is the most embarrassing thing that has happened to me, like hyperboles and stuff like that tend to capture important information. So it's not always the case, but it is in many
Yeah.
cases, more often than not. So yeah, and that unlocks a second level eventually if you want to get a little bit more professional with it, which is when you start thinking about, how do I show this information now that I understand the meaning, attaching it to a metaphor, to a concept, to a story. And it's the storytelling part, which I am asking myself. For example, if somebody talks about, I don't know, AI, in your case, and you talk about I guess I forgot the word again, the sidekick. Yeah, the sidekick. The first thing that came to my mind when you used the word sidekick was Batman and Robin, but there could have been a lot of
Oh yeah.
sidekicks, sidekicks, in pop culture. So what I'm thinking now is, where have I seen references of something that looks like this that I could draw? And that's a little bit more complex, but it's possible through practice, through like pulling that thread of thought that we, the rabbit holes that we go to just normally, but just like control them in a direction that takes towards communication. Like, I want to use something that communicates the same meaning, but that surprises people because they haven't thought about that. That's when the things get really, really, really fun, at least for me, with graphic recording and sketch notes. Because taking notes, it's fine, it could be fun. But when you're telling stories and making people go like, ah, or like, oh, I get
Yeah.
it. That's for me the part that uh, that reinforces learning so much and makes the thing so memorable, that it brings me the most
Oh, and it
satisfaction.
triggers something in in a reference to somebody that goes, I get it. Or you probably have been in the spot where you've seen the light bulb go off over people
Yep.
or 100 times, going like, oh, now I get why you did that, in the Easter eggs or whatever it might have been in there, which
Yep.
is great. That's so
Yeah.
cool. And you've now, I can't imagine how many. I thought I've gone to some conferences. You've probably got a laundry list of places you've gone, and I love that you do this all proactively on your own in a way. Question for you:
Yeah.
what has come out of being such a part and a participant in our community, particularly in the creative field? What benefits have you seen? Why do you keep going?
So you mean going to conferences that are
Even
creative?
just being a part of the creative community, and in most cases
Okay.
going to these events, and what advantages do you get aside from the notes you've taken, and just obviously networking and the people that you get to meet and these things that
Yeah.
you get to affect as well too. What are some of the coolest things that have happened, and just being a part of this community and being such a you're putting yourself out there?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question, and it's also probably an underwhelming answer, because I haven't been that active in creative like
Mhm.
hangouts or conferences and stuff like that. Most of the work that I've done have been, as I said, for foreign, quote,
Yeah.
corporations, like things that most creatives would be like, oh man, like, because they want to do cool stuff. And my thing is doing cool stuff for people who need it, because they're not cool by themselves,
Yeah,
like they're doing cool things,
it
but
needs a
it's just like
boost.
geeking in a different
Yeah.
direction. Exactly. They are lacking that creativity part, at least the artistic creativity part of their work or their job description. So I've attended a lot of conferences of, like, I told you, marketing and um, real estate and stuff like that, but not so many that are creative conferences. And actually, Creative South last year was the first one that I had been in a very, very, very long time, and it fall right in the right
Mhm.
moment, because it was actually like the day before I had finished my full-time job. So like,
Wow.
I've been a year freelancing, right? Like, well, my own business,
Congratulations.
and it was the boost that I needed, right? Like, so being connected, and just like from my experience, somebody who, I mean, I've been working in creative people, and the work that I had was fantastic. I still work with them, but they're like my clients now. Um, which is a cool thing, like never burn bridges. But what I was going to say is like it fell in a time in which I needed to be surrounded by people who were living as freelancers for the most part, or who were like pursuing their artistic passions more, uh, let's say, like more
Yeah,
rawly. I don't know
that's
if
a
that's a
great way to
word,
say
but
it.
like like they were just kind of in the trenches on that, and I wanted to get inspired by that. But it's a funny thing too, because like again, circle back to generosity part. I am a I am a shy extrovert. So what that means is that I feed with the energy of people around me, and I need to be surrounded by people who are creative, who are smart, who are interesting. But I'm not the clown of the party. I'm not the one who is making all the jokes and who's being like super all like that. So it's very hard for me to get involved, because I can just kind of gravitate towards people, but then I feel kind of awkward. And the way that I compensate that is by getting involved and serving in some capacity. So last year in Creative South, I arrived there, and I arrived like super early, and I saw some people running around like crazy, and I was like, and it was like, do you need any help? Yes, we need help, please. So I hadn't signed up to be a volunteer, but I volunteered anyway. And then I was like, I'm just gonna do whatever I could do. And there's like Ingwars, okay, I want to do it. Like there's stuff that I could do with Sketchnotes, and I can serve in some way to people. Like, I'm just gonna do it. So that's how I get involved, and that's how I get known, because people appreciate helpers, right? And it just makes it easier for me to make connections. Oh, you're the guy who did this thing, yeah, okay. And it's not for, oh, you're so cool, or no, it's just for me to be able to have an excuse to have a
Mm.
conversation. And I feel like if more people had that approach, and not say that everybody needs to do it or anything like that, but if you are the person who struggles to make connections, the best way to make connections is to actually be helpful. And that applies even for business. The more helpful you are, the more business you have, because people, of course, want to hire you if you're useful. So
Wow.
I feel like being part of a community of people who are just open with their knowledge, vulnerable in their failures, as well as their accomplishments. People who are, down to earth, who are not there for ego reasons, but who just wants to support others. I feel very blessed that Creative South is so close to me, because it's just a few hours away from me, that I was able to attend without having to think about, flights or hotels or too much craziness like that, because it was right what I needed when I needed. And I feel like I could keep going just because of that sense of belonging, of being known by other people and knowing other people and being able to contribute. So I don't know if that was
That
underwhelming
was
or
poetic.
overwhelming,
That was
or
poetic,
but
dude. That was
yeah,
so great. I think because you're
yeah,
right. Like I think my perception was that you do go to a lot. You have done this a lot. It's like, and to hear that this is fairly new to you, but you have found these key
yeah,
ways to kind of maneuver in. And I think so many of us
yeah.
are that shy extrovert, or
Mhm.
I've heard people saying like, I'm a introverted extrovert, all these different ways. And
Uh-huh.
so I think the way you put it was perfect. It kind of feels like it describes a lot of people in the creative community that, you know, maybe are a little afraid to put themselves out there or to walk into that room. And you don't have to be that life of the party. You don't have to be that thing that the
Mhm.
spotlight is on to still make a contribution
Yeah.
and to make a connection, right?
And in fact, to reinforce that, I know for sure that I'm not gonna be able to meet like 80% of the people who go to any conferences. So I used to feel overwhelmed, back when in my early 20s, when I used to go to conferences and stuff like that. It was like I felt like lost in the crowd, and that's an awful feeling to have. Like you're just, a sheep, just bang around, and for me, I was like, okay, it doesn't matter that I meet everybody. That's not the point. The point is that I get to have meaningful conversations. So if I meet somebody, I'm kind of gonna stick with
Good.
them, and that's what I do. And that what I did in last year and this year as well. Like, I knew there was other people that I might have wanted to be able to talk with, but I decided to just get to know this new people that I have met and just have conversations with them. And I feel that's the most fruitful way to approach it. You don't have to eat the whole pie.
Yeah.
You know, it will give you stomachache. So
Great. I can see the
and
drawing already.
yeah, yeah. That's how I think. I just think in images. But and I was gonna say too that, you know, the creative conference thing, that not being able to attend this, the Creative South, I attended already. I signed up for another conference in July, and that's pretty much my capacity, because the rest of the time I need to be doing work, you know, unless I get hired to go
Sure.
to a conference. That's a different situation. But before that, I had my full-time job, so of course I didn't have also the time and the resources available. And then there's also the fact that I I love to travel, but I like to not travel a lot, if that makes
Mhm.
any sense. And the reason for that is because I have a family, I have a wife, and I have a 5-year-old, and I want to be there for them. And part of the reasons why I transitioned out of my job was not because I hated it, 'cause I loved it, and they actually had offered me a promotion and a big raise and all that. And I was like, I just cannot keep commuting or dedicate this amount of hours. I need to be with my family, and I know that I can make a living and still work with you guys while not sacrificing the most important thing for me, that is my family. So that's partly why I take that decision. And I guess the biggest part, the biggest reason why I took that decision, it's pretty hard to leave something that you like, you know, but if it's the right reason, then I think
You
that
knew
makes it
in your
easier
heart, you knew in
and
your
faster.
heart it was something you needed to
Yeah,
do. It's like you get to put a little bit
yeah,
more of the control in your hands, and
mhm,
but get the balance that you so wanted at that point, right?
yeah. Yeah. And it's also my point in life. Like, I'm 36-year-old, you know, and I know I'm not gonna live forever. I don't have $2 million to spend every year to keep myself alive forever.
I love that guy. He's great.
And yeah, he's awesome.
We can learn from him though,
But
Alejo.
definitely. But what I'm gonna say is, like, you know, there's seasons in life
Mhm.
for sure. And I'm a firm believer that your 20s are for just doing crazy stuff, like, you know, pulling all-nighters, maybe working a full-time job, and like hustling because you have the energy. And most people don't are not married, don't have kids, so you have a lot of freedom to do all those things. Like, at this point in my life, I need to approach it in a different way that is more efficient, that the amount of time that I spend doing things makes the most amount of money, so can have free time for other things that I need to do that I know are important. um, but that's something that comes with age.
Exactly, right.
I feel super old saying that, even though, I mean, I have these white hairs here, but I don't feel that old, which is a funny thing.
But
But
it's
anyway,
also the
that's another
wisdom,
story.
and it's those things you get in later stages of your life that you go, that takes the priority. And so, like, everything as far
Yeah,
as making the most of things, making the most of time, making the most of an opportunity, you know, and I think that's
yeah,
what you're doing. But I love the way you put yourself out there too, and the stuff you've done, like on your Instagram and your website. We'll shout that out, and it'll be in the notes as well. But lastly, like, where did that come from? Like, bro, some of your things on Instagram just had me going, like, I'm so happy I've met you, dude. You're just such a positive person, and you put such really good things out there that I think so many people want to hear. Where did that come from?
that's a good
Ooh, I stumped
question.
him.
Yeah, I mean, there's many places where that come from. If I want to go hardcore deep, I think it's a response to my upbringing. I'm an only child. And again, I said I'm a shy extrovert. So making friendships was kind of hard for me. And, you know, I was kind of awkward. I was always a happy kid, but I was kind of awkward. And then my parents divorced. And then my dad was not so involved. And I kind of missed that. Carry a lot of anger in that regard. Um, and then when I was in around 15 years old, 14 years old, I was just like sick of everything, you know. And I know every teenager to some degree has that angst and that struggle. Um, for me, it was hard, and I feel like at some point in my life, I encountered people that believed in me and that poured into me, and, you know, unconditionally. And being on the receiving end of that, like, I feel like it's really hard for you to receive such a great gift and not feel the need to give it back to others. You know, there must be something wrong if somebody's like, okay, thank you, that's mine, and I keep it. I mean, I don't want to be judgy, but at least my reaction was like, it's just an overwhelming sense of gratitude, you know. And when I realized that I could help others, it became addictive. I started, you know, doing this when I was like doing helping others, like I guess what I'm trying to say, when I was maybe 15 years old, 14 years old. I went to a camp, like a summer camp, and like it changed my life the way people approach that. And when we had like, because nobody knew me there, also it was a change of environment. Like I was out of all the prejudices from the people who knew me in high school or middle school, and I was able to learn about myself again, and then share things that I haven't been able to share, because people will be like, yeah, whatever. And people will listen. I was like, you know, that's insightful. Oh, you know, that's very useful. And I was like, oh, I have something to contribute. That, you know, ignited something in me. And then later on, there was a church that opened close to my house, and my mom kind of pushed me there saying like, the place is really pretty, it doesn't look like a church, it has like a big tree. And I was like, it has a big tree? Yeah, it has a big tree. Okay, let's go see it. A really cool tree there, and it looked like a farm, like it was fantastic. And I was the only guy who was 15 years old in this very small group kind of setting, and learning from people who were way smarter than me, like older than me, more experienced than me, but they treat me like one of them, you know. And I felt like it was not condescending. They just valued me, and they let me experiment and fail and try. And, you know, looking back, I'm like, people who have given me opportunity to do things, not judge me, but just like present opportunities and then advise me when I need it, has been so pivotal. Uh, Especially because as somebody growing with just his mom as an only child, and not having other reference, at least like male reference, until then, it was of great value to me. And later on, I just started getting involved, and I served and I helped with youth group stuff for like 10 plus years, all for free. Like I wanted to do it for free because I wanted to help other people. And just seeing the lives of kids transform, and like people coming up, you know, to for advice, and I'd be able to actually help them in some way, it just became something that I'm like, I mean, how could you not help if helping feels so good? It's not also helping other people, of course, but it's also making me realize that I can be, I'm meaningful, you know, like I have something good to give to others. And that's also a responsibility, because then it was like, okay, I want to do it better. I want to do it better. And I started becoming this geek of learning, just like learning about communication, learning about leadership, learning about psychology, self-development, all those things. And now I realize that when you share all that, not only do you help others in ways that you cannot even imagine, especially with an online audience. Like I don't know how many people I'm actually reaching, but there's some people who's I've never spoken to, and suddenly like send me an email. It was like, hey, that email that you sent was awesome, or like that post was awesome. It's like, that's so cool, you know, that's wonderful that I can have an impact in people's lives. But then it also keeps me from downgrading myself. It keeps me fresh, you know. The fact that I'm pushing myself to be out there and to teach and to show things to people helps me stay on top of things and helps me get updated, which is a nice feeling. Like I don't want to feel like a dinosaur when my kid is 15 years old. It's like, Dad, what are you talking about? You're so out of tune, or whatever phrase they use at that
It'll be
point. You
something
know?
else. Yeah.
So it was something else. So I mean, that's a long story, but I think it's just essentially I've been the receiver of a lot of grace and a lot of generosity, and I just live my life trying to give it back.
Amazing, dude. Bro, you're so amazing. I'm so glad we met. Honestly, like I know you're gonna be a friend for life. I can't wait for the next conference that we get to kind of finally get to hang out at,
Yes.
right? Like I hear
Yes.
you on that. Go
Yes.
ahead and share where folks can find you or reach out to you, because I really, bro, I've been doing this for 10 years, and I think some of the stuff you said is really going to resonate with folks. And if it did, please reach out to Alejo and let him know. Where can they find you, bro?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn. So disclaimer there, LinkedIn is for work. Um, Instagram is my neighborhood, so you can follow me freely there, and you can send me messages, and I'll answer, and that's all good. LinkedIn is where I commute for work, so if you want to, you can follow there. But if you want to make a connection, please make sure that you send me a message so that I know, and so that you also like present yourself, be like, hey, what are we trying to connect? Because if you're just gonna follow my work, then just follow my work.
Don't send that default message,
I don't mean
man.
to
Make it custom.
Exactly. But Instagram, so it's Alejo Porras Art, ART, and that's where you can find me, and then my website and all that. I also have a newsletter that I send every week. It's called Fresh Ideas, and you can find those links in my Instagram. It's a free thing that I just share my experiences, the things that I learn, and also I give like a short rundown of how my business is doing, because I know I'm making mistakes, and I want people to be able to be like, oh, this guy doesn't have to figure it out.
Nobody has
too.
newsflash, right?
yeah. So yeah, just follow me there.
We're framing this. This is one of the best things I've ever been given as a gift. I can't thank you enough, dude.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining, and man, can't wait to talk to you soon.
Yes, all right, likewise. See you.